This is Scramble, Battle of Britain, and it's a World War II dogfight simultaneous turn-based tactical war game. I think, yeah, it's quite a lot of words there, but basically you take turns controlling fighter aircraft in World War II. In this case, the Battle of Britain. So it's between the Royal Air Force and the Luftwaffe, and you get to plan out all of your fighters in your section, plan out their maneuvers, uh, and then load it into the computer, and the game will play out both sides in real time. So it's a cross between a real time and a turn based. And I've been waiting for this game for ever since it was announced almost like 3 years ago, I think, at this point. Right now, if you want, you can go onto Steam and install the demo because Steam is having their Next Fest event. And I'm kind of mixed on what I've seen so far. I've played about 2 hours of the game now, and it's got quite a lot of content in the demo. You have a lot of missions. The tutorial isn't that good, but remember, it's a demo. It's the alpha version of the game, so this is not the final product. And there are quite a few issues in the menu UI, and the performance every now and then the optimization is kind of lacking, but it still runs pretty well. I mean, it's technically turn-based after all, so it doesn't really matter if you lose some frames here and there. But yeah, I was a little bit mixed because I played the board war game versions of air combat, tactical air combat. So things like Blood Red Skies or X-Wing games along those kind of mechanics where you have a sort of turn-based system against your opponent and you control fighter aircraft as they maneuver around and try to gain position to shoot each other. And that was what I was expecting from this game. From what I saw in the reveal that they had years ago, and it kind of looked like that. But what I found was when I was looking through the control schemes and the settings, there were a lot of there was a lot of information regarding controllers. So that raised a few eyebrows for me because automatically I assume the worst these days that if there's like a controller thing, then must have been like a port for some kind of cheap game somewhere. But I don't think that was the design philosophy behind what they've made here. I think what they were trying to do was just try to make it more accessible to more people. But in doing so, I think they might have sacrificed some of the kind of tactical gameplay involved because even though it looks like it's a tactical simultaneous turn-based strategy game, it doesn't really feel or play like it. And I'll try to explain why. First of all is the control mechanics here. So the gameplay footage in the background here, you can see me trying to maneuver what the game refers to as the ghost of the aircraft. So it's showing you the prediction of the move in the future as you're planning out the moves. So it hasn't just happened yet, but this is if you wish to execute this maneuver, this is how your aircraft would move. And they also show you the enemy's ghost in red, but those ghosts are the predicted moves. It may not be exactly what they're doing, but given the position and the previous maneuver that the enemy has performed, this is the predicted way that the computer thinks that they are going to maneuver. So you can try and line yourself up with that. But as you can see in the gameplay here, more time is spent trying to just maneuver the aircraft in such a way to try get the shot. And I know everyone here is going to be saying that that's the whole point of air combat maneuvering, but no. What I'm trying to say is that compared to like the board war game versions, there's more time here spent trying to micro the exact point of the aircraft to try get that shot because the damage mechanics and the shooting mechanics in this game are very unforgiving. You have to be pretty close up to the enemy aircraft that you're trying to shoot and have a pretty sustained shot on them in order to do a lot of damage. It's not like in War Thunder where you can take a shot like 600 meters out and snipe the guy's pilot or anything like that. The whole aspect of damage in this game is designed to make it very hard. But the way they tried to double down on that is by trying to make it so that you have to really manually try to aim the aircraft against the enemy. So you spend a lot more time just trying to get the aircraft to line up on the enemy instead of looking out towards the big picture and trying to maneuver your section against the enemy fighters in the section. It's not that tactical as compared to like the board game versions, where usually in the board game versions they are very lenient in the accuracy that you as the player need to input in order to damage or even hit the enemy target. They try to focus your attention more on the tactical maneuvering of the whole section that's on the board. X-Wing did this great. I don't think there'll ever be quite a game like X-Wing. I know that the mechanics in X-Wing aren't new. There were other games that did it. I think there was actually a World War One and a World War Two card-driven system that was basically the same that X-Wing was kind of based off. I think it was called Wings of Glory or something. I can't quite recall. But yeah, here of course having a computer version means you can simulate the 3D environment, because in board games you can only have it's only played on the tabletop, so it's only two-dimensional. But trying to simulate 3D on a board game, it has been done before. I know some games that have tried to do it. I think there was a game called in Clouds of Glory, I think. But the problem with trying to do that on a board is it's very, very finicky, and it's very tedious as well, trying to simulate a 3D environment on a tabletop. So having a computer game like in Homeworld, which I think one of the first games that really showed that this was a kind of mechanic that you can implement that the player can interact with without it being so tedious. They do a pretty good job here in this game, having the 3D environment and having the aircraft flight characteristics programmed to do it, because you can stall your aircraft, you can black your pilots out. That's in the game as well if you pull too many Gs. That's all been factored into the game. But at the same time, like I said, most of the time is spent just trying to line up the aircraft to get the shot. You don't spend too much time trying to figure out all the tactics involved. So that's where it was kind of disappointing for me. But at the same time, I had quite a lot of fun. I mean, it's a World War II tactical air war game. There's not a lot of them out there. So because of the way the game models its damage mechanics and the shooting mechanics, combat scenarios can last quite a long time. I think in the 1v1 scenarios, I had one go on for like 30, 40 turns, somewhere around that. So even though it's simultaneous turn-based, it can still take some time to actually play out a full dogfight. And having multiple aircraft in an engagement, that takes even more time. So I'm not entirely sure how many aircraft they're going to cap you out at. I think they might just go maximum a squadron or so. So yeah, the game isn't going to be like grand air battles or anything like that. It's going to be minor skirmishes. It's just going to focus on simulating dogfights, basically. On that note there, you will see it in the gameplay footage in the background. There is a point where I put the Spitfire into a negative G maneuver. And remember, these are the early Spitfires. So just to fill in for folks who don't know, and I learned this when I was playing War Thunder. It took some time for them to really properly put it into the game in such a way that it would be detrimental to the player to pull off such a maneuver in the Spitfire, in the early Spitfire. If you pull a negative G in a Spitfire, you basically kill the engine because of the way that the early Merlin engines were designed. In this game, that's not modeled. Now, once again, it's an alpha version, so it could very well still be in the works. Who knows? But that is an interesting point just to raise here for the demo. Not sure whether how much detail they intend to put in. But yeah, that's a thing that I noticed in the game. Now, the current AI that's in the game isn't particularly good, but that's something they could rectify, I'm pretty sure, very easily these days. But one interesting game mechanic which I don't quite like is the fact that an aircraft can just leave combat in the middle of the fight. That is part of the game. You can see it at the bottom of the screen at the HUD system to the right. It says leave combat. So if a position is pretty bad or you've been shot up, you can just click the button and it will just take your aircraft out of the game. You'll see it happen towards the end here. Several of the enemy aircraft just bail out because, not bail out, I'm sorry, just leave the combat zone because we had gained such a superior positional advantage over them that they couldn't do anything. So they just left. And that means that they will just disappear right in front of you. um, the way I've seen other games do this is in War Thunder, some of the events, they'll have a specific zone that you have to fly to first in order to leave the combat zone. I think that would be a better mechanic to have put in here. Because if you can just bug out and leave when things are looking bad, and just disappear right like that, I mean, kind of defeats the purpose for all the maneuvering that's going on, in my opinion. In another game that I've seen I think it was Atlantic Fleet, not exactly a air combat game, but the way they modeled the disengagement mechanic is you have to pop smoke for 3 turns consecutively, and then you can just, leave the battle. Not entirely sure how they could do a system here. I think that if you just fly straight and level away from the combat zone, that should give you the ability to leave, whilst at the same time trying to give the option to the enemy that if they want, they can try and intercept you before you leave the combat zone, and you'll be in a very vulnerable position doing so. So you got like a kind of a dilemma there that the players can have if they want to take this risk or not. It might pay out, it might not. Who knows? Yeah, that's an idea there, but the kind of mechanic of just leaving combat in the middle of the fight, that needs to be worked on. So I'm gonna leave the gameplay running in the background because I don't really have many more points to add to what I've seen so far in the demo. But as I've said, I'm mixed on it, right? I had fun, but at the same time, it wasn't quite the kind of game that I thought it was going to be. I guess that's the design philosophy they're going for, trying to do that, but I would really like it to have been a little bit less on the micro side, trying to aim your aircraft all the time and focus more on the big picture of the sections fighting. The way to do that, I mean, plenty of other games, you just copy it from the board wargame style where you don't need it to be so accurate in the shooting mechanics. The damage mechanics is completely fine. I actually like that because it's very realistic. Unlike in War Thunder, where you can, like I said before, you take a shot at like 600 meters against a moving target and snipe the guy as a pilot. Air-to-air combat for Second World War, especially during the early years, pretty much is like this. You need to get really close to the enemy and then try to stay in behind them to get a long enough burst with the machine guns that they had at the time. Well, for the Royal Air Force, that is. The Luftwaffe this time already had cannons on their fighter aircraft. But yeah, I quite like the way they went with the more realistic approach to the damage mechanics. It's just the shooting mechanics, right? Getting the shots in. I think they can compromise in that department because it would take away the kind of I think the unnecessary amount of micro involved in just trying to line up the shots to get it work. I think it would be completely fine if it just had an arc of fire that if you get your aircraft into this arc, and the arc doesn't need to be big, right? It can still be quite small, so you still need to have the fidelity to maneuver the aircraft precisely, but not as precise as is necessary at this point in the game. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. So that's all I've got to say about that. Definitely check it out because I did have quite a lot of fun, and I think I'm gonna keep on playing a couple more scenarios moving on. So yeah, thanks for watching.